Hello Python coders. I am Alan D. Moore and I am still the author of Mastering GUI Programming with Python, a book that takes you on a magical mystery tour of the PyQt libraries. In this video, I wanted to start with the basics. We're going to take a simplified Hello World style PyQt application and we're going to examine every piece of it. And when we're done, we're then going to transform it into a template that you can use for any simple application. So right here in the editor, what I've got is about the simplest Hello World program you can do in PyQt. And we're going to go through this line by line. So let's just start with the first line. So you can see here I've got my imports. I'm importing the PyQt libraries right here in this first line. And all we need for this basic of an application are the things from Qt Widgets. For a more complex application, you're going to need more than that, but we'll get into that later. So the next line here, we're creating a Q application object. A Q application object is sort of the basic management object of any PyQt application. It is not tied to anything that you see on the screen, so it's not like your root window. If you're familiar with tkinter or something like that, this is not quite the same as your root window object. This is just sort of a management layer for your application, and basically the most important thing that this does is that we're going to use it to run the event loop. We'll talk about that in just a minute. But the application object is the first thing you have to create in any PyQt script. You have to have one before you can create any kind of widget or window or anything you're going to see on the screen. Alright, so the next line, we're creating a Q widget. So a widget, if you're not familiar with this terminology, is any of the GUI items you see on a screen. So a button is a widget, a label is a widget, a text input is a widget, a menu is a widget. It's just a generic name for any kind of GUI item you would create. And the QWidget class in this case is the most basic bare bones widget of them all. It's just basically a blank panel with nothing on it. And it can either be just a blank window, or it can be a panel as part of another GUI. We are creating that and assigning it to a variable named W. Notice here that I have also put in a window title. So this is a property of the widget. All widgets have properties that you can assign. The window title property, when I set it, means that if this widget is going to be a main window, if it's going to be its own window, then it's going to have a title of Hello World. Okay, on the next line I call the show method of the widget. Show means to show the widget, obviously, but it also means that this widget is going to be its own window. It's not going to be inside of another window. It's not going to be part of a form or some other widget. When we call show, we are making this widget be a top-level window. Okay? Once I've done that, I call app.exec. So notice it's exec underscore. You might sometimes see it without the underscore. Either one works. The reason for the underscore is that exec is a reserved keyword in Python. And it's just kind of good practice to not use reserved keywords for method names, even though it works. And you can run it either way, it will actually work. But just if you're being a stickler about keywords, they have the version with the underscore. So I go back and forth on which one to use. It doesn't really matter. Let me explain this concept in case you're not familiar with an event loop or GUI programming. So when you start programming, you're mostly doing what we call procedural programming. So a procedural script is something that the flow of the code starts at the top. It executes one line, it executes the next line, the next line, the next line, the next line, and it gets all the way to the end of the script. It produces output or does whatever the script is supposed to do, and then it exits. And there may be some interaction with a user in the meantime, but it's all in order, right? So if you've written a little command line script, say with the input command, okay, that would be a procedural script. A GUI behaves differently, right? So if you launch a GUI program, it doesn't run through the same steps every time, does it? Instead, you have objects on the screen that the user is going to interact with. The user might click a button, the user might press a key, the user might resize a window. Each of those things is what we call an event. So an event could be something the user does. It could be, say, a timeout from a timer. It could be a lot of things. But the point is, you are creating objects that respond to events. So when I click this button, the program needs to run this command, okay? And the way that a GUI program handles that is it has what we call an event loop. So this would just be an infinite loop. And inside this infinite loop, it waits for events to happen. And when events happen, it runs whatever appropriate routines need to happen for that event. Okay, so when we say app.exec, this is usually the last line of the program, or at least the last line within the flow of execution, because this line is going to run until the program exits. All right, until all of our GUI is closed out and we're no longer responding to events. Okay, so we're over in the terminal now, and we're going to execute our program. So here we go, Python hello world.py. And as you can see, this simply generates a blank window with a window title of Hello World. Not super exciting, but it's something to build off of. All right, let's close that out. Let's switch back to our Hello World. So this is the basic layout of any PyQt program. And let's just review. So first you're going to import your classes. You're going to have to create a Q application object. Then you'll create your widgets and show your widgets. Finally, you'll run the event loop. That's going to be the same thing in any PyQt application, no matter how complex. Now, of course, the complexity is going to come in this section where we create our widgets and show them. Obviously, that's where the bulk of your program is going to lie. Let's go through this and let's transform this. We're going to create a template for our PyQt applications. And this is a template you can use for probably just any small to medium sized application. It's something I use. And let me just transform this and show you in each case why I would make these changes and how we're going to end up using this. And then in a future video, we'll actually use this template to build an application. So let's start with the first line. In the first line, we are importing from Qt widgets. And we're doing it with what we call a star import or wildcard import. Now you can do that, and a lot of tutorials and textbooks will do these star imports, but I don't recommend that. I don't like this, and I will explain why. So to understand why not, we need to understand the concept of a namespace. A namespace is just a word we give for a space in the program where we use names and where all the names have to be unique. So for example, this script right here is a namespace. I have one thing called app. If I name something else app, now all of a sudden this object is gone, right? Because there can only be one object named app at a time. That's what we call a namespace. So if I would to say import the OS library, OS has lots of things inside of it, like os.path. OS would be another namespace, right? So path in my root namespace wouldn't mean anything. It would have to be os.path because path is in the OS namespace. If I import path from OS, now path is in the root namespace. Okay, so what does that have to do with star imports? When you do a star import, you are taking every single name in this namespace, the Qt Widgets namespace, and importing it into your root namespace. When you do that, you can't see what all is imported. So who knows how many things are in here? Actually, let's find out. Okay, there's a function called locals. It's a built-in function in Python, and it will give you a list of all the names in the root namespace. If we take the length of locals and we'll print it out before the import, then we'll print it out after the import, we'll see how many names we are adding to our root namespace. Oops. Actually, we want to run template, don't we? There we go. Okay, so right here we see 9 and 213. So before our import, there were 9 names in our root namespace. Afterwards, there are 213. So we've added 204 names to our local namespace. What are those names? I don't know. I know some of them. I know that QWidget is one. I know QApplication is one. I know a handful of others. But I don't know what all those other names are. And that creates a problem, because what if one of those names overwrites something that I'm using? What if I accidentally overwrite one of those names? We just don't know. It's not explicit. And explicit is good in Python. So how do we fix this? What we want to do is keep all of those names inside the Qt Widgets namespace. Okay? So now instead of QApplication, it would have to be Qt Widgets.application. And instead of QWidget, it would have to be Qt Widgets.QWidget. That way, we've only imported one name into our namespace, and we can see it right here on the screen. It's explicit, so we're not going to accidentally overwrite it. The only problem with this is I don't want to have to type Qt Widgets with mixed case characters every single time that I need something from Qt Widgets. That's kind of tedious, and if we're trying to keep our line lengths short, it's a little counterproductive. But Python allows us to alias this. So we can say import Qt Widgets as QtW. And that's just my own little alias that I like to use. Okay? So now, instead of having to type this big mixed case word, we just type QtW. Now, Qt is divided up into dozens of modules, okay? But the 3 that you're going to use in almost every sizable application is Qt Widgets, Qt Core, and Qt GUI. What do these contain? So Qt Widgets are your widgets. It contains any kind of widget class, as well as some layout classes. Qt Core is more low-level stuff. So, for example, our signals and slots, which we'll get into later. I like to import Qt Core as Qt Qt GUI, let me fix this typo here. Qt GUI contains classes that are not widgets, but they're related to the GUI. So for example, our font classes, color classes, things like that. Now there are other Qt modules, as I said. There's networking modules, multimedia modules, there's web browser module, actually 2 web browser modules, all kinds of things. We won't need those in every program, but we're almost always going to need these 3 libraries in any program we write. So now that we've got that done, let's talk about our AppLine. Okay, this is always going to be the first thing we're going to run in any program. Doesn't mean it has to be right under the imports, and we'll talk about that in a bit. But let's look at this argument we're passing in here. So we're passing an empty list to Qt application. That shouldn't actually be an empty list. What we really want to pass in there are the command line arguments to this script. So to get those, we need the sys library from the standard library, and we will use sys.argv, which gives us a list of the command line arguments that were passed to this script. And the reason we do that is that any PyQt application has a certain number of default command line arguments it can accept. And those can be used to set things like the theme and the rendering engine and several other options. And I'll have a link in the description documenting what all those default arguments are. But to make those work right, and anyone using a Qt application should be able to reasonably expect that these command line options will work. So to make use of those, we need to pass sys.argv into Qt application. All right. The other way we can use sys is down here when we run our event loop. So the event loop, when it exits, will have something called an exit status. And when our Python script exits, it will also have an exit status. That exit status tells us whether or not the program executed successfully or whether the program executed with some kind of an error code. This is important mainly to users of Linux or Unix because they usually can expect to have some kind of exit status that will tell them this command succeeded. So for example, in my terminal, I might run a command and say some command and some other command. When I do this in a Unix terminal, whether it's Mac OS, Linux, BSD, whatever, this and means that I'm only going to run this second command if the first command succeeds. In order to know whether this command succeeded, it needs to give me a valid exit status. Okay? So what we want is for our Python script to have an exit status that matches the exit status of our event loop. To accomplish that, we are going to call sys.exit and then put our call to app.exec inside of sys.exit. This will get our app.exec exit status passed to our script. It's a small thing, it's a trivial thing, but it's just one of those things that makes your app behave more like users will expect on certain platforms. Okay, now we're going to get into the widget part. So this is where the bulk of your code is going to go. And it needs to be created in here between app being created and the event loop being run. But we don't want to define all our code in there because that's just a little ugly. You could, but it doesn't scale very well. So what we're going to do up here is we are going to create a class. And we're going to do this, we're going to call it main window. We're going to do this by subclassing QWidget. Now, if you are not someone who has worked with classes before, this may be a little scary to you. Don't be scared. This is something you need to get used to if you're going to work with PyQt, because the Qt libraries have been designed to be very object-oriented, and the way to use them properly is to subclass them. Okay, when you want a customized QWidget, when you want to put other widgets on it, when you want to define special behavior for it, The way to do that is to subclass it. And all that a subclass means is that you're saying, I'm going to give it this new class, I'm going to give it this name, and it's going to behave exactly like this other class, except where I have defined it to do otherwise. Okay? So right now, if I just put pass in here and change this to main window, okay, let's see what this does. You can see it does exactly what it did before. We haven't really changed anything. It's still a Q widget. It still behaves like a Q widget, but it's called main window now. But we don't want it to just do nothing, do we? Okay, so we're going to override a method that's called underscore underscore init underscore underscore. These methods with the double underscores, we call them dunder methods for double under. They are special in Python classes. These are methods that do special things, and there's several of them. The init one is what gets called whenever we create an instance of a class. So right down here, when I say main window and call that like a function, what that's doing is it's running this init method. Okay? So in a method, in a class, we start out with the first argument always being self. And self refers to the actual instance of the object that we are creating. All right? I'm going to do star args, double star kw args. Okay, so if you've not seen this in a function definition, what this is this is going to be a list of all the positional arguments, and this is a dict of all the keyword arguments. And that's something you can do in any function if you don't know what arguments might be passed in. Inside init, we're going to call a special function, a built-in function called super. What super does is super gives us a reference to our parent object, to the QWidget object that this object is going to be based on. Okay? And we're going to call that parent object's init method. Okay? Oops, so it should be args. We're going to pass it all of the arguments. Okay? We're going to pass it all the arguments that were passed to the parent method. All right. The reason for this is that we want all the behavior that happens in the QWidget's init method to still happen in our derived class. So I'm going to save that. Let's go back to the terminal, run that again. It should still, once again, we have our Hello World window. If I didn't run super, let's comment that out. Back to the terminal. Now, oops, sorry, disregard that. Got to put a pass in there. Now, let's run it. You'll notice we get an error. Superclass init of type main window was never called. Okay, so this happened when we tried to show the main window. What it's telling us is that we never initialized that underlying QWidget object. So keep this in mind. You're going to be overriding widget classes a lot, subclassing widget classes a lot in PyQt. You need to make sure that you call super in these methods when you do. Okay, now that we've done that, the way this template works is your code will go here. Okay, so I'm actually going to erase this window title because we don't want Hello World anymore. So for example, if you needed a callback method, you would do that here. And of course you would define any widgets here. Okay, So there we go. I'm going to delete this extra code. One thing I do also like to do is put our show call down at the end of our init method. The way we can remove it here. The only reason you wouldn't want to do this is if you don't necessarily want this window to show when it's created. If you want to have control over when it's shown. Usually when I create the window, I want it to show, so I just put that command right in there. The last thing we're going to do is we're going to add a pretty common Python idiom here. And we're going to put this code under a block. This is called if name equals main. So this is a standard Python idiom. And what this means is it means only run this code if it's this script that I've actually run. Okay? So the other possibility is that I may have imported this script as a library. If I say wanted to import main window into another script, I don't want this script to create an app object. I don't want it to create an instance of main window. I don't want it to run the event loop. I just want the definition of main window. Now you might say, well, when would I do that? You know, if this is my main part of the script, I don't think I'm ever going to import that into another class. Well, down the road, when you get into packaging this application, whether it's with setup utils or PyInstaller or something like that, you're going to find that you're going to run things a little differently, and you may actually want to be importing this somewhere else. So this guard just basically says only run this code if I'm actually running this script. And that's it. That's my template. I will have a link to where you can download this template and the Hello World. Check that out. Once again, this is all stuff I cover in my book, by the way. So if you like this content and you're thinking, man, I wish I had a hard copy of this to peruse at my leisure, by all means, pick up a copy of Mastering GUI Programming with Python. Thank you again for watching. Hope this helped you. Again, in a future video, we will use this exact template and we will create a GUI. So thank you all for watching, and God bless.